Ina mana, ina reo, ina rangatira mā. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. No mai, haere mai, welcome to this webinar session that I'm pre-recording for you on Zoom. Today I want to talk to you about Ngā Ara Whaihua, the quality framework that the Education Review Office has developed, and Te Ara Poutama, the indicators of quality that sit as a tool in that framework. So in this presentation, I just want to briefly talk to you about the Education Review Office and where we sit in the New Zealand education system. I want to provide you with a context for Ngā Ara Whaihua. So why have we developed this framework at this time? I want to unpack the metaphors drawn from Te Ao Māori, so Māori worldview that underpins this framework. And then briefly dip into Te Ara Poutama, the indicators of quality, and conclude by talking about some work we are doing to help services use the findings from their internal evaluation and from ERO's external evaluation to plan for improvement. So this is a bit of a visual of where the Education Review Office sits in the education system in New Zealand. And we are independent of the Ministry of Education, and we report to a minister. Currently, we have an Associate Minister of Education who's responsible for the Education Review Office. And our mandate, we were established part of some education reforms in 1989. We have legislative powers that give us the right to enter schools and early childhood services and to perform an evaluation function in doing that and report on our findings. So why are we updating our methodology for early childhood education? Well, it is something that we have done regularly every 7 to 10 years since ERO was established. Often our review of our methodology is in response to changing context in the sector. So we know we have new research and evaluation evidence since we last updated our indicators about 7-8 years ago. Our curriculum to whāriki has been updated. We've seen quite a lot of change in the sector over the last 10 to 20 years. We've seen growth in the number of services, different ownership structures. We're still seeing a bit of turnover in terms of leaders and teachers in the sector, and we have over time had an increase in the number of children participating in early childhood education, and particularly in the area of the children that are up to the age of 3. Our data is showing that some of our services who get a licence to operate from the Ministry of Education don't continue to maintain what they need to do to meet the requirements in that licence. And that's particularly so for our new services. We're seeing ongoing reporting in the media of issues and concerns where there are incidents, licensing issues or complaints, particularly around children's safety and wellbeing. So we see a need for ERO to strengthen its role in terms of accountability, and we have that function. But we also want all services to be on a pathway of ongoing improvement. And that hasn't been the case in recent years. Our evaluation report data shows that a lot of our services are quite happy to sort of get through an external evaluation and be judged to be well placed, but don't continue to improve. So, you know, I think we've got hugely variable quality out there, and we've got a bit of what I call a soggy middle, where we've got services that are quite happy to go along day to day, but have no incentive or desire to do better. And so it becomes a little bit of a lottery for our children in terms of the quality of the service they get to participate in, and that's not okay. So we have introduced Ngā Ara Whaihua, and this slide takes you into the heart of that framework, where you can see a vine, Ngā Aka, or in this case, Te Aka, one vine. But the metaphor of a vine is really useful for us in thinking about growth and improvement. That for a vine to grow, it needs the right conditions, the right nourishment, and the right structures. If we think about grapevines, we don't see them lying on the ground in the vineyard. You know, it's where they're planted, it's when they're planted, it's the soil that they're planted in, and the conditions and the nourishment that they get, and of course the structures that support them to grow and bear fruit. And so we want to think about quality in that way as well. So talking about Ngā Aka enables us to think about the part of the vine that is closest to the ground, that is planted in the soil, papatuanuku. So we have our akanuku, our assurance reviews, where for ERO, that means for some services, we will go in and focus on that part of the vine. Are they meeting the requirements of their license on a day-to-day basis? And we want services to also look at, do they have the right conditions? Do they have the systems and processes to maintain those licensing requirements, particularly with regard to children's health and safety and well-being? We then have akarangi, our quality evaluations, where the focus is on improvement. And that part of the vine, of course, is where a lot of the growth is happening. And so we see akarangi as a way of being able to support improvement on it, in terms of quality. And that is where Te Ara Poutama sits in terms of Ngā Katoru, our domains. So the way that we've grouped the indicators into 5 domains, and Ngā Rāpupuku, the 21 process indicators and the 20 outcome indicators. And when we think about the vine, those indicators are the many shoots and sprouts and leaves that indicate the healthy nature of the vine. So a really powerful metaphor. We've also drawn on from Te Ao Māori the metaphor of Poutama, which depicts levels or steps, can depict also a journey. And you can read about that in Te Ara Poutama. The third metaphor is Ngā Ara, which is about the multiple pathways. There is not one way there isn't a recipe for quality. I forgot to talk about akamātua at the top there. This is where our vine, where the newest growth is happening. And here we're going to engage with early childhood services to do some case study evaluation work to showcase innovation and excellence. So when you look at Ngā Ara Whaihua, the framework, you can see Ngā Aka, you can see the Poutama, and you can see a sense of a journey. And for the Education Review Office, we're using this as a basis for how we will evaluate quality, but we also want services to use this framework. So how strong is their vine at the place where it's planted in the soil? What the nourishment is it receiving? Has it got the right conditions? Are they making sure that children's safety and well-being is taken into account and looked at on a daily basis? At the base of this framework is a Māori word, whanaungatanga. That word is about family-like relationships, and we see the importance of those relationships in any evaluation activity. Evaluation is a relational activity. So how do we do our work as the external evaluators, and how do the services come to work with us when we undertake our evaluation, or work with their communities when they're engaged in their internal evaluation. We have the principles of Te Whāriki, and we have compliance with regulatory standards, all foundational to this framework. And you can see the 4 lines under Akamatua, they are our 4 regulatory standards. The 5 blue lines going across under Akarangi are Ngā Akatoro, the 5 domains of Te Ara Poutama. And then we have more lines under Akamatua, and that's where we are generating new knowledge. So Te Ara Poutama, our indicators of quality for early childhood education or early childhood. What matters most? We published these indicators online during lockdown last year in March, and distributed copies to the sector late August, early September. But we began the work to develop these indicators in 2017. This work was led by one of our evaluators, Lee Rowe, and we had an internal reference group and an academic expert panel. So we began with a scan of the literature, and then we invited 5 key academics across different domain areas to critique the indicators we had at the time. And they wrote background papers, which we then used to develop our draft indicators, and we sought feedback on those before we published. So the academic work was undertaken by Dr. Alex Gunn, Dr. Kate Thornton, Dr. Ali Glasgow, Dr. Maria Cooper, and Dr. Leslie Lamaka. And the indicators, these are the principles that underpin the indicators. Because of time, I'm not going to unpack each of those and talk about them. But I think one of the really important things is that these indicators do focus on the conditions that are most likely to provide equitable opportunities for children to learn and to promote their learning. And these conditions are interconnected. So this was the resource package that we sent out in late August, early September last year to our centre-based initially, our centre-based early childhood services. So our kindergartens, play centres and education and care services. So we had Te Ara Poutama, we had designed a poster, just a one-page way of being able to access the indicators, but also frame them in terms of the conditions, and a judgment rubric, which I'll talk about in a minute. So the poster, Ngā Pupuku indicators, includes reference to the outcome indicators. They are the 20 learning outcomes of Te Whāriki. So those are the statements of valued learning that over time we want our children to develop the capabilities in relation to those outcomes. We have 21 process indicators. 10 of those indicators are grouped under learning conditions, and the remaining 11 are under the organisational conditions. So the weighting here is quite important. We have nearly half of those indicators sitting in the learning conditions. And those learning conditions cover 2 domains, He Whāriki Motahaki, the learner and their learning, and Whakanunu Ngaio, which is about the collaborative professional learning and development that builds knowledge and capability of teachers. And so using this, framing the indicators in this way and using it, we can start on the left-hand side in an evaluation context. So saying, what's happening for children in this service? And these indicators, these 10 indicators are like the leaves on the aka. They can tell us a lot about what's happening for children in the service, particularly when we also look at what the service knows about children's learning in relation to the learning outcomes, the outcome indicators. On the right-hand side, we have the organisational conditions. So we have Ngā Aranga Whaihua, which is about the evaluation for improvement, the internal evaluation that services do. We have Kaihotu, which is about leadership, and Te Whakaruriho, which is about the governance and management of the service. So if great things are happening for children, and the teachers are working as a really strong professional community, and they are up to date, and they have shared understandings of Te Whāriki and the theories that underpin it. They know how to work to design and implement a responsive curriculum for children at the service. Then we can ask, why is it so? And it may well be this great leadership, and it may well be they are really driving their improvement because of their understanding and practice around evaluation. And it may also mean that they have a governance structure and people in governance roles that understand what their governance role is in relation to children and their learning. And so then we can say, so what, make a judgment, and what next? If things aren't great for children, then we can also look across to the organisational conditions and look at what needs to improve here in order to improve the learning conditions. Something new in the approach that we are taking in the Akarangi quality evaluation space is to move away from an overall judgment and to use judgment terms which indicate movement on a continuum of quality. So we will be making in our external reports, for an Akarangi, we'll be making 1 of 5 judgments for each of the domains and in relation to what the service knows about children's learning. So you can see there, some services may well be whakatō emerging. Others may be at the whāngai establishing stage. Some will be at the whakau, the embedding, and some will be really sustaining that improvement, maybe not across all the domains, but in some of the domains. And so that's whakawhanaki. And we will have some of our really high performing services excelling kia rangatira ai te titu. So we want services to use these judgment terms in their internal evaluation and be able to talk with ERO about where they see themselves on the continuum and on the basis of what evidence. And ERO will also make judgments about where our evaluation shows the services and on the basis of what evidence. And we've unpacked these terms in relation to the conditions and using the metaphor ngā aka. Time doesn't permit me to go into and explore those terms in depth, but you can see there a service that's emerging, that's a place of potential. So what's the nourishment required so that those practices, systems and processes can be established, can establish themselves? And then what needs to happen for those to be embedded? So we have developed and shared with the sector, these are shared resources. So the indicators are a shared resource, a common currency of talking about quality. And this rubric, I'm just showing you one side of the rubric, has been developed from the indicators. So it's not to be used on its own. And it's really to be used at the point where you've undertaken an evaluation and you may have some findings and you want to then be able to look, so where are we sitting on this quality continuum? We are about to publish a couple of more resources for the sector, again, shared resources. Ngā Aranga Whaihua, improving quality in early childhood education through effective internal and external evaluation, is a resource to help services use the indicators in Te Ara Poutama and to use them in quite a structured way. That resource also includes some description of how ERO undertakes an akarangi, a quality evaluation. The other resource that we are soon to publish is a fold out to support services with their quality improvement planning. And you'll see we're calling it Piki Aki Taki Aki. It's about striving for excellence. And at the heart of quality improvement planning are our indicators, te ara potama, that when they are used in the context of an evaluation, whether that's internal on the left-hand side or external on the right-hand side of that diagram, you can use the judgment rubric to look at where are you sitting on that continuum and what do you need to do to improve. We're also publishing a resource for parents that takes the first 6 indicators and unpacks them in terms of what might you see, what might you hear, what might you feel, what might it be like for your child in a service where these indicators were a strong feature of practice. So that's a bit of a whirlwind through the work that we've been doing here in Aotearoa, New Zealand. And I thank you for engaging in this webinar. And I'm very happy to receive emails or engage in some further discussions. So, nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa.